and welcome to Delhi Dialogue. My guest today is someone whose political analysis and predictions with numbers I've been watching for decades now. He's himself in the thick of politics now. A very special guest, Yogendra Yadav, joins me right here on the show. Thank you very much for being with us. You're really in the thick of action. I'm going to talk to you about your political campaign and all of that in a moment from now. But I will really begin with talking about the political discourse right now. The Aam Aadmi's poll plank began with anti-graft, anti-corruption. It has completely switched to anti-Modi now. Obviously, a very conscious attempt at your part. Why is that so?
I don't see that as a switch because we are attacking Mr. Modi on grounds of graft and corruption. Mr. Modi has managed to create an image of himself thanks to a lot of PR support and all kinds of things that go into the making of images. He has managed to create an image for himself of someone who's honest, who's straight. And we are saying this can't possibly be true. Look at the evidence. Look at what has happened to Adani household. Look at his silence on anything related to Ambani's. So what we have done, in the case of Delhi, you could say, did we shift from anti-graft to anti-Sheila Dikshit? No, we did not. We took on the major political rival. And similarly here, the major political rival right now is Mr. Modi, because Congress is nowhere in this election. Congress has simply abdicated the ground.
Right.
So we are attacking him on his claims of development, on his claims of being honest, and we graft, and systemic corruption continues to be the central theme in our campaign.
I buy your point on that, but I will still ask you this question. When you were contesting the Delhi elections, it was very apparent. The rhetoric was anti-corruption. Here it is anti-Modi, not just his development agenda. There seems to be the sense that there is a fear if Modi comes to power. What is that threat? What is that fear? Because you seem to be very conscious of 2002. You seem to be very conscious of the communal overtones as well.
Absolutely. I've said it again and again in my campaign, and I've said it for the last 20 years, especially last 12 years since the Gujarat riots. Mr. Modi stands in opposition to the very idea of India. This country is founded on a social contract, and the contract is that all diversities have to be respected, that no one community, no one religion can trump over others, that the state has to be strictly neutral, and any form of majoritarianism is not acceptable. Mr. Modi's conduct over the years has shown elements of a leader who simply does not believe in it. The idea of India has three components. One, democracy. Mr. Modi represents soft authoritarianism. Two, inclusive development. With Mr. Modi, it is development or growth for a few at the cost of everyone else, if you look at the human development indicators of Gujarat, and respect for diversity, where Mr. Modi stands for majoritarianism. So I'm not saying there is no one else who's opposed to any one of these three. Lots of politics in this country goes against one of these three.
Right.
Mr. Modi happens to be the one who opposes all these three elements. So he is at the intersection point where it is fundamentally opposed to the very idea, the very dream of India.
If you speak to people in BJP, and the argument that you get from them is, and on this series we've been interviewing a whole host of people, is that yes, there are charges of being authoritarian, being majoritarian against Mr. Modi, but these are exactly the charges why India wants him there. India is so sick of a very weak prime minister, a very indecisive establishment, that they want somebody strong, they want somebody decisive there. How would you refute that argument?
I take the point that the performance of the Congress party in the last 5 years was a perfect advertisement for anyone who provides something strong, something decisive, no matter what it leads to. So yes, Congress has done everything to create a background for Mr. Modi to emerge.
Right.
And if there was no alternative, if there was no third option, that would have been the most natural outcome. It's just that the Aam Aadmi Party phenomena, which is not such a party phenomena, it's an Aam Aadmi phenomena,
right,
which has come in the way and seeks to provide a third alternative, that you don't need to be, don't need to go for authoritarian options. So what we are witnessing in this election is to save the very foundational principles of this country, the idea of democracy, the idea of inclusive development, and the idea of diversity. That's what we are struggling for. Now the question is, how much damage has Congress already done in the last 5 years particularly to create background for Mr. Modi? So if Mr. Modi does well, I think the principal credit should go to Mr. Manmohan Singh. And there is a media hype about Mr. Modi. I mean, let's face the fact. There is this huge media hype supported by supported by some of the biggest money in this country, supported by huge PR industry of the kind that Indian politics has never witnessed. So we are up against this giant PR machine.
That's right.
And that is why forces like Aam Aadmi Party, small as we are, we have to take on this establishment.
Let me ask you a very candid question. There's a Rahul Gandhi and there is a Narendra Modi. Who is the bigger evil of the two?
I think it will be a tragedy if this country has to choose between Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi. This country has had Mahatma Gandhi, this country has had Nehru, this country has been led by Tagore. And it is such a tragedy, it is such a joke that a country like this has to choose between Rahul Gandhi and Narendra Modi.
But tragic as it may be, there is electoral politics, there is electoral reality that we have to live with, and which is why I insist that you give me a name between the two people. Who's the lesser evil?
On both of them represent a regress from the idea of India that I mentioned earlier. If Narendra Modi represents semi-authoritarianism, Rahul Gandhi represents dynasty rule. On development, if Narendra Modi represents crony capitalism, Rahul Gandhi represents the remnants of the old welfare state. On diversity, if Narendra Modi represents majoritarianism, Rahul Gandhi represents vote bank politics. Why should I be made to choose between the two? That's what Indians are asking. That's what Aam Aadmi Party is asking. And if you have to go back to the old politics of choosing between the two, what's the difference? Why do we need a new party? Why do we need anything else? So we certainly resolutely are opposed to the idea of having to choose from this. We have confidence in India. India would do something better than this.
Why is this attack on Mr. Mukesh Ambani? There are references made to his media control. There are references made to his association with Narendra Modi or the association he had in the past with the Congress. Critics, and I'm going to be the devil's advocate, critics believe you do not have proof and facts to back your arguments. There is this vicious campaign against Mr. Mukesh Ambani. I can tell you though that the Reliance communication machinery is in full gear trying to thwart it.
Yes, and the might of Mr. Ambani is not just Reliance Communication. So much of this actually comes via mainstream television channels. There's nothing personal against Mr. Ambani. He happens to be one of the industrialists. Like in the case of Mr. Narendra Modi, he happens to represent the point of intersection of some things which are fundamentally opposed to the constitutional vision that we have here. We have an industrial house which right from its inception has broken every rule in the book. Everyone in the country knows about it. And when a book was published, as you know, the book disappeared from this country. I mean, you cannot even... Yeah, the book disappeared from this country, which simply named what Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani had done in order to make his first million. And so what Mr. Ambani represents, I mean, the word crony capitalism does not even begin to capture it, but basically he represents a phase of capitalism which prospers not by its own industry but primarily by bending state. It is the worst combination of license quota Raj and capitalism because it's primarily by tweaking licenses that they acquire the money that they do. Number two, they represent the nexus of big money and big politics, which is not at all unknown. In the country. Everyone knows that no party can go against him. And three, he's not just anymore a business power. He is also in some ways the biggest media power of this country. So what you have is the making of an empire which has a business component in it, which has a state bureaucracy component in it, which has a media component in it, and which has a politics component in it. Now that is a perfect recipe for destroying democracy or reducing democracy to a mockery. And we are fighting to save democracy in this country.
I'm going to ask you one more question on gas before I move on to the whole crony capitalism argument. Critics believe and critics say that this whole gas pricing formula was devised by a technical expertise committee by Dr. Rangarajan. There were technical people involved. These are, far more complex matters than people like you and I know. Point taken. The larger question, though, is that there are foreign investors, and everybody keeps talking about this investment climate in India. There are these foreign investors who would have wanted to come and park their money in India. They see here is one party which was opposing the gas price hike. The Election Commission buys the argument, it's a political issue. Let me keep my money with me instead of pumping this in India. In a sense, have you shooed away foreign investment? Do you take the blame for it?
I don't know if we have, but the simple thing is here. The technical committee is given a mandate. The question is, I'm asking you to dig a well for me, which is my property, and I ask you to put in some money, dig a well for me. You come back and ask me, you are entitled to your costs, you are entitled to some profit. But what you start doing to me is to say, all right, a bottle of water costs this much in the market, give me a price of that bottle of water. What kind of technical expertise? I mean, this is basically shifting the ground itself. The committee can only then decide, the basic decision has to be a fundamental decision about whether you are going to pay Mr. Ambani the cost of oil extraction, or are you going to pay him market price for my own thing. Once that is done, then it's the job of technical committee to only decide how the composition should be arrived at. Mr. Rangarajan committee, which was a very, very strange judgment. But the simple fact is that it went for option B rather than option A. Have we shooed away foreign investors? I hope not. Yes, those who may have, those who want to come to India because they know it's a completely unregulated fast buck to be made. If they move away, that's not a bad idea for our economy. Right. Long-term serious investors, I've met many investors thanks to this Lok Sabha campaign. They do not want this kind of complete brazen collaboration of state and capital. They want it to be, they want to work hard, they want to earn their money, they want the license quotas to be reduced so that they can work, they can produce. They want dismantling of unnecessary regulation. But they do not support this kind of brazen crony capitalism.
The question that emanates from there is that who decides who's crony capitalist? Because isn't that discretionary also? Isn't it ad hoc also? Amongst a bunch of India Inc., amongst a bunch of top industrialists, who is clean and who is not? Isn't that discretionary?
It depends on evidence, on case-to-case basis. Obviously, there is no reason to suspect everyone, which we have simply not done. Some of the best industrialists...
So you don't believe the entire private sector is bad?
We never said that. In fact, I have gone around speaking to investors, to industrialists, to business people to say most of Indian business is honest, wants to do an honest business. They face all kinds of obstacles in the way they operate. Those obstacles need to be removed. Healthy enterprise must be encouraged, and this is the job of the state to create conditions in which enterprise can thrive. Indians are great entrepreneurs, and of course we must make the most of it. And I do not see why anyone who wants healthy enterprise would wish to use tweak state power to gain extra advantages. What we have here in the case of KG Basin, in the case of all the things that Reliance Industry has done, or in the case of telecom scam, etc., what you have is not honest business. It is use of political clout in order to gain business of a kind that you do not deserve. In the long run, it harms market economy.
For the benefit of our viewers, for market participants who are watching this show, they've always been very curious to know what is the economic ideology of the Aam Aadmi Party. You're not still out with your economic manifesto, and people are curious to know that. Is profit a bad word? If you look at private enterprise with suspicion, which you say you're not, who's going to pump in the big money? Who's going to create jobs? Where will growth come from? Who's going to make the investments? These are questions that investors, market participants, foreign investors looking at India would want to know. In short, if I were to ask you, what is the economic ideology of the Aam Aadmi Party? Are you against things like privatization to begin with?
We have said again and again in the last few months, I must have done dozens of interviews with all the leading economic papers, with channels, to say we are neither left nor right. The idea that we believe in the orthodoxy of the left is completely mistaken for the very simple reason that something did collapse in 1989. And that thing was a belief that market could be excluded, that you could have development without market forces. Markets are here to stay, and thank God we have market, because there is no better disseminator of information and aggregator of choices than market is. No state can ever replace that. And regulations are here to stay. I do not know of any capitalist country in the world which does without regulation. So we are simultaneously over-regulated and under-regulated country. So what we need to do is to dismantle the over-regulation part of it. I see no reason why the state should be running Indian Airlines, we should be running this ITDC and all kinds of things. This is not the business of the state to run business. At the same time, we need better regulation. We need better regulation about conflict of interest. We need better regulation about greater disclosures in public space, especially as and when business touches politics or business touches media. We need much greater disclosures. Otherwise, it is not the business of the state to run economy. It is the business of the state to create climate and environment in which a healthy economy can flourish.
I'm going to come to my last few questions, back to politics again. The question that a lot of people ask is that on what grounds are you asking voters to vote for you? They gave you a mandate in Delhi on grounds of principle, like you would say, which is going to be refuted by a few people out there. You decided to throw it away. Your track record of governance was very short-lived, and it doesn't impress too many people because you've given it up. On what ground should people vote you back?
We had got a very unclear mandate. Unfortunately, we have been judged as if we had 40 seats in Delhi Assembly and as if we decided to throw our government despite that. The fact is that we had no majority, that we had a very short window, that the entire political establishment of the country and some significant sections of the media ganged up against us. And in that, all we could do is to do some key decisions, which we did, and mind you, not one example or not one allegation of any kind of corruption whatsoever. The trouble is that our 50-day government has been judged as if it was a 50-month government. We were asked questions on day 4 whether we had implemented our manifesto. I do not know if any government in the country has been asked such questions after 4 years. So in all that, we managed, we performed. And yes, we decided to exit because we did not want to be a hostage to Congress and BJP. As you know, it was very easy for us to strike a deal with Congress and to extend the longevity of our government. We played a principal role. Coming back to your question of why people should vote for us, those who are sick and tired of the way politics is run in this country, and those who want a force of virtue, those who want a force of principles, those who want honest and clean politics should vote for us and give us a chance to be able to influence national politics.
Because you've always been very candid, I'm going to ask you this question. On hindsight, do you regret giving up the Delhi mandate? Because that did cause a little bit of disillusion. Do you think there's disillusionment on the ground about giving up Delhi? And is there, on hindsight, a regret about it?
A lot of people, including our supporters, were unhappy that Arvind Kejriwal gave up, chief ministership of Delhi. But you have to distinguish between two kinds of unhappiness. One unhappiness is the one BJP wants to drum up, which is to say they are unprincipled, they've destroyed, they've betrayed the people or anything else. The other unhappiness is, oh, but couldn't you continue a little longer? Couldn't you do a few more things for me? On balance, the first one is a tiny part of that unhappiness, which is largely drummed up by the media. The second kind of unhappiness, I would concede, is there. I have heard this from lots of ordinary supporters and sympathizers. And what we need to do is to explain to them the fact that that we did not have a mandate. You said you've thrown away a mandate. The trouble is we did not have a mandate. And next time we get a mandate, we would like to be able to demonstrate that yes, we can perform.
If you could turn the clock back, would you have given up the Delhi mandate? I'm again going to call it mandate because you did give up the Delhi government.
I don't think we had too many options. It was a Chakravyuh-like situation. And the trouble in a Chakravyuh-like situation is that it is easy to get into the Chakravyuh and it is very difficult to come out of it. I would still credit Arvind Kejriwal for having chosen a moment. I mean, you could have two opinions about how the last end game should have been played out, but this had to come to an end was in a sense written into the very situation itself. And there are lots and lots of situations that people do not fully appreciate. The manner in which the power companies were going to play games with us.
That's right.
And we had seen already a glimpse of that. The name of the game was switch off Delhi's electricity and blame Delhi government for that. And if it's in the month of May, you don't want to hear nuanced argument about who is responsible for Delhi without electricity.
Because people do not want to live in the dark or in that heat.
Absolutely. And then you say, no, actually it's electricity company which is doing, it is actually Reliance which is playing games, etc. No one wants to hear that. So what really happened was that there was a tiny force of virtue which comes up, and the entire establishment brings all its might to smash it. And I think in that very difficult situation, that Arvind came out of it. Again, as I said, there could be two arguments about how the end game should have been played. I could probably think of now in hindsight, one can always think of smarter ways of doing so. But that one had to come out of that Chakravyuh was absolutely written into the logic of the situation.
A lot of times they say you do not have the luxury of hindsight when things are happening. And so my last question to you, we are talking at a time when Arvind Kejriwal has decided to take on a Narendra Modi. You followed many elections, you know the patterns, you know and because we spoke about the might of Mr. Modi and the whole PR machinery, isn't that too risky a political bet he's taken? Especially when he's not just looking at Delhi now, you are really looking at the India landscape, so to say.
The one thing you can say about Arvind is that he's always taken risks. Risk of a Magsaysay award winner getting into politics, risk of a grand social movement turning itself into a political party, the risk of taking on Sheila Dikshit when no one gave him a chance. And I must confess, I actually advised him against it. I said, look, why don't you choose a safer constituency? But he wanted to make a point. And I think we are making a much larger statement here. As a ex-psephologist, I can tell you the ground is much tougher for Mr. Modi than he imagines it to be. Banaras is not just there is Metro Banaras. Banaras is much wider and has different landscape. But the point Arvind is making is that Aam Aadmi Party stands against the juggernaut that Mr. Modi represents. And that point is irrespective of political consequences. So I really salute Arvind for his courage every time when he took on Sheila Dikshit, and now that he's taking Mr. Modi on. In the case of Mrs. Sheila Dikshit, the results were surprising. It could well be the case with Mr. Modi. And you can see that while Arvind is taking the risk, Mr. Modi is not. I mean, here is someone who says there is a wave in his favor in the country.
But he's hedged his bets.
And he's not able to even say, all right, I'll contest in this one constituency. And what kind of wave is this? I would invite Mr. Rahul Gandhi to come out of Amethi, come to Banaras. Let's have a clear battle there.
And a three-way battle indeed. Because you refer yourself as an ex-psephologist, you've been one of the finest this country has seen. I'm going to ask you to remove your Aam Aadmi Party hat for just one moment and wear that psephologist hat. At the end of 16th May 2014, realistically speaking, I'm going to ask you three scenarios. Can Congress cross 100? Will BJP plus NDA get to that magical 272? And realistically, what are going to be Aam Aadmi Party's numbers?
The first two are most unlikely. It seems to me the way Congress has been completely marginalized in this election. I see that in my own constituency. I mean, the Congress is nowhere, not even trying to contest seriously. So Congress has been marginalized, and my own sense is Congress is headed for its worst ever performance. NDA on its own, I don't see how it can possibly touch the kind of figures that it has. Do remember, in every single parliamentary election, all estimates, and I'm saying that with care, remember 2004, remember 2009, NDA has been systematically overestimated by everyone. And sometimes with conspiracy, sometimes without conspiracy, because the section that happens to favor NDA happens to be the most vocal, and the excitement about it in the media has always outstripped the excitement in the public. So no to the second. To third, I do not know. I do not have good polls with me. The trouble is that every single poll happens to underestimate a new and emerging party, which is what happened in Delhi.
That's what they did with Delhi, yes.
So, and that's the only point I was making to them again and again. Please, we know from all over the world that small parties, which are rapidly emerging, are underestimated by polls. Let's not be so
They were
confident.
giving you 6 or 7.
4,
You came back with
6.
28.
That's what they said. We came with 28. So all I would say is be prepared for surprises. But I would not make any big guess about it. The fact is, I do not have the evidence on the basis of which I used to make those guesses, those estimates. And the fact is, Aam Aadmi Party simply does not have the money to conduct an all India survey to find out where we stand. In Hindi, I say, पहले मैं भविष्य बताता था, अब मैं भविष्य बनाता हूँ. And I like the second thing, making future rather than telling future. That's more enjoyable. That's much better thing.
India will perhaps miss one of its finest psephologists, but we wish you the very best. We want clean, nice politicians in our system. Thank you very much for talking to us, sir.